Way down yonder on the Mississippi, to find the headwaters was a little tricky. How many times do you think explorers got the source of the Mississippi wrong? Once? Twice? I mean, after all, how hard could it be? Today, we are going to be exploring the science of self-promotion while hiking around the true source of the Mississippi River at Itasca State Park in beautiful Minnesota. Along the way, we're going to tell you the stories of all the different failures and successes of finding the true start of the mighty Mississippi. You're going to meet a soldier, an Italian adventurer, a headline chaser, a lake-coming lake renamer who all had their shot at finding where the Mississippi River starts. Some are outright lying, and most of them missing. Let's go hiking. Today's trail is the Ozawindib Trail to Deer Park Trail. The trail is 3.5 miles long with 272 feet of elevation gain and, of course, is part of the Minnesota Hiking Club trail system. The hike is rated moderate and it takes about an hour to an hour and a half complete. And with the trail stats out of the way, let's get into the story of the search for the headwaters of the Mississippi River. So the story of the start of the Mississippi begins with the Dakota and Ojibwe people. It was Europeans who would later argue over where the Mississippi begins, but Native nations didn't think of the river that way. To the Dakota, the river was called Hahawakpa, meaning River of the Falls, a reference to what we now call St. Anthony's Falls. The Ojibwe called it Mississippi, which means Great River, the name that eventually evolved into Mississippi, although I'd wish they'd kept the Z's in the spelling. French fur traders picked up that Ojibwe name and later translated it to Mississippi or Mississippi, and from there it spread across maps, journals, and eventually into the hands of U.S. surveyors and soldiers. But to the people who lived here, the Mississippi was never a river mystery to be solved. It was a vast living network of lakes and rivers and portages. In 1803, the United States completed the Louisiana Purchase and took control of a vast stretch of land that included the unknown source of the Mississippi River. And with that shift in ownership came a shift in mindset. Suddenly it mattered where the river began, for maps, for borders, for politics, and for power. We gotta pause for 1 second for my navigation song. Do I guess which way I'm going, or do I just check a map? Should I guess which way to go? Oh, maybe I should check a map. I see a sign and it says go straight on this way, the trail. I'm gonna go on this way because the Deer Park sign says so. The first official U.S. attempt to find the source came just 2 years later when the government sent Lieutenant Zebulon Pike to explore the upper Mississippi River. His mission was to map the region, establish relations with native nations, and find the river's source. In early 1806, Pike reached a wide lake fed by the Turtle River. At the time, it was known as Upper Red Cedar Lake. Today we call it Cass Lake, but that name wouldn't exist for another 14 years. Standing there in February of 1806, Pike believed that he had reached the main source of the Mississippi. In his journal, he wrote, "I will not attempt to describe my feelings on the accomplishment of my voyage, for this is the main source of the Mississippi." I'm not sure if that's his accent, but that's the accent we're going with. Pike didn't have precise instruments or modern maps. He simply went as far as he could and followed the largest tributary visible at the time. And to him, that meant the river started here. He was wrong, but not outrageously so. Later expeditions would go further upstream, past the chain of confusing lakes, marshes, and creeks, but for a while, Upper Red Cedar Lake was the best guess the U.S. Army had. For over a decade, the Mississippi's supposed source at Upper Red Cedar Lake was still on the books, but doubts were growing. So the U.S. government sent another, much larger, better equipped expedition into the region, this time led by Mission Territorial Governor Lewis Cass. Along with Cass was a young geologist named Henry Rowe Schoolcraft. Their expedition was backed by scientists, soldiers, and interpreters to map the land, study its resources, and of course, find the true source of the Mississippi. When they reached Upper Red Cedar Lake, they believed that they had confirmed Pike's earlier claim, and they saw it as the furthest navigable point and the most prominent body of water along the upper river. It made sense to them, so much so that they renamed the lake Cass Lake after the expedition leader himself. Notice they didn't rename it Pike or Zebulon Lake. On reaching Upper Red Cedar or Casina Lake by a mouth of 15 yards in width, we arrived at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This may be considered the true source of the Mississippi River. Schoolcraft Journal entry, July 21st, 1820. But just like Pike, they had not gone far enough. The party tried to push upriver beyond Cass Lake, but they were blocked by low water, thick vegetation, and a lack of time. So, in the official record, Cass Lake became the new headwaters of the Mississippi. Maps were updated, textbooks followed, and for over a decade it stood as the accepted source, even though they had just changed the name of the lake from the original claim. The real source of the Mississippi was still waiting just a few lakes upstream for them to claim. Okay, this next one is by far my favorite of the explorers. Just 2 years after Cass and Schoolcraft declared victory at Cass Lake, a new contender entered the story, one with flair, drama, and a whole lot of self-confidence. Giacomo Constantino Beltrami was an Italian nobleman, former magistrate, and something of an eccentric. He traveled to America partly in political exile and partly in search of meaning after the death of a woman he loved. He decided the best way to grieve was to set out alone, aka with guides, and try to find the source of the Mississippi River. I wish we had time to do an entire episode on just Giacomo. He is a very interesting character. In 1823, he had briefly joined Stephen H. Long's expedition, but he had clashed with the crew over how a nobleman should be treated. So Beltrami struck out on his own with a couple of Ojibwe guides and followed the river upstream. After navigating remote lakes, dense forests, and swamps filled with mosquitoes and mystery, somehow he made it, or at least he claims he did, boldly and loudly claimed. Beltrami declared he had found the true source of the Mississippi at what he called Lake Julia, near present-day Bemidji. He even planted an Italian flag and named the lake after the woman he had lost, Julia. Very romantic. But there was just one problem. He was wrong. His supposed source was actually a small tributary, a feeder stream far from the river's true headwaters. Still, Beltrami beat his own drum all the way to the publishing press. In 1824, his book, The Discovery of the Sources of the Mississippi, was a hit in Europe, if not exactly embraced by American scientists. Today, Lake Julia still exists, so does Beltrami County, Minnesota, named in his honor. So he may not have found the source, but Beltrami carved out his own place in history with a mix of adventure, exaggeration, and the kind of confidence only a 19th century romantic could pull off. So, by 1832, the race to find the source of the Mississippi is still unresolved. I wonder how much longer it's going to take. Well, it was in 1832 is when Henry Rowe Schoolcraft, who had been part of Cass's earlier expedition, returned to settle the matter once and for all, and this time he had help. Schoolcraft's party was guided by a young Ojibwe man named Ozawindib, and a member of the Cass Lake Band, and Ozawindib didn't need to search for the source, he already knew where it was. Over several days of tough canoe travel through lakes, bogs, and streams, Ozawindib led Schoolcraft and geologist Douglas Hoyton up the Mississippi's narrowest reaches, eventually arriving at a quiet, shallow lake locals already knew well. On July 13th, 1832, 12 years since his previous journey, Schoolcraft wrote, "We came to a small lake, which the guide stated to be the source of the Mississippi. It is called Omushkos, or Elk Lake. I give it the name of Itasca, formed of the Latin words virtus and caput, the true head." That made Schoolcraft the first Euro-American to identify Lake Itasca as the actual headwaters of the Mississippi River and the first to rename it. But Ozawindib was the one who brought him there. Without his knowledge of the landscape and the waterways, Schoolcraft likely would have made just another guess. So while Schoolcraft's name makes the history books, Ozawindib deserves as much, if not even more credit. He knew this land and he led the way. But the story doesn't end there. Yes, I know you would think that after finding the true source of the Mississippi River, that would be the end of the story. No, there's still more to tell. 4 years later, in 1836, French mathematician Joseph Nicolet arrived with orders to clean up the maps, and he did it with precision and respect. He took barometric readings, he mapped elevation, and included Dakota and Ojibwe names in his records. In 1838, he confirmed Lake Itasca as the source. His 1839 map of the hydrological basin of the upper Mississippi became a foundational document for future surveys and is still admired today for its accuracy and cultural respect. No drama, no flag planting, no book writing, just science and a better map. You'd think by now the origin of the Mississippi River would be settled. Well, we still have quite a few dashing and bold explorers yet to make their claims. In 1872, a journalist named Julius Chambers tried to reopen the debate, claiming Elk Lake was the real source, but nobody bought it. And just when things were finally starting to settle, along comes Willard Glazier, a Civil War veteran, self-promoter, and best-selling author who knew how to work a crowd. In 1881, Glazier paddled up the Mississippi with a crew and declared that he'd found the true source of the river, not Lake Itasca, where Schoolcraft had pointed 49 years earlier, and where others had since confirmed, but a small lake just upstream, Elk Lake. And, sticking with tradition, he of course renamed it Lake Glazier. But Glazier didn't just make the claim, he made it a national event. His book, Down the Great River, painted him as a heroic explorer, uncovering long-missed truths. He got newspapers, map makers, even publishers to start using the name Lake Glazier. For a short time, it worked, but scientists weren't buying it. In the late 1880s, the Minnesota Historical Society, backed by surveyors and geographers, officially reaffirmed Lake Itasca as the headwaters. Glazier's claim was dismissed as unscientific and self-serving. He oversold it, and history didn't let him keep the naming rights. Today, Elk Lake is back to being Elk Lake, and the only thing still bearing Glazier's name is a minor spur trail, which even now feels a little generous. The glory of being the discoverer of the true source of the Mississippi River is an honor worth striving for, Willard Glazier said in 1881. Yeah, bless his heart. Finally, in 1889, a new figure stepped in, Jacob V. Brower, a surveyor, historian, and Minnesotan who came not to guess but to measure. He spent 2 years mapping the entire headwater region in meticulous detail. His conclusion? The actual source of the Mississippi River is in Lake Itasca and nowhere else. Elk Lake is but a feeder, a subordinate water, Brower wrote in 1893. Wow, that was definitely the nail in the coffin for Glazier and other pretenders' claims. But Brower didn't stop there. He saw the land being logged and damaged, and he fought to protect it. And thanks to his tireless lobbying, Itasca State Park was created in 1891, preserving the source of America's greatest river. And I just love that in 1891, someone had the foresight to think about preserving what, again, is such an amazing place, especially if you've ever been downriver on the Mississippi, just to see how huge and massive it gets, which was my very first experiences with the Mississippi. So it's really cool to juxtapose that against the very beginning, aka the source. And there you have it. That is how the source of the Mississippi headwaters was eventually, after 57 years, officially confirmed to be Lake Itasca. I highly recommend that you go up there and check it out. It is a beautiful state park. It is a huge state park, and as you walk this hiking club trail, you will be surrounded by lakes. It is a lot of fun, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I really do love reading comments. They make my day, and I'll see everyone out there hiking in the woods. Bye-bye, y'all.